Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. For the last several years now, you've had a lot of black people who have been more than willing to say that the killings and murders of their loved ones were not racial in nature. Why, they would even go so far as to say that they forgive the killers, all of them thinking that they were making some sort of chess move to get themselves a bag. Far as they were concerned, as long as they got a paycheck and it made them a millionaire, well, their loved one didn't die for nothing, right? We've been following these anti-black lynchings for the last several years now, and the family members of those who were killed, if you watch them, especially if they got in front of the cameras soon after the murder, you could almost see the very moment that they went from being outraged to looking out for a check. And the black media has been telling you for a while now that these white supremacists in government who have been willing to throw a little bit of shut up money to these negroes, which is their own taxpayer dollars, by the way. The white supremacists are literally bribing you with your own money. But we told you that was a game that they weren't going to be playing forever. Sooner or later, they were going to be turning off the spigot. Oh, sure, they got their sick little jollies when they made sure that for a hot minute, when a white woman got killed by a black cop, why, they would shell out a ton of money for her, and for black folks, well, we're going to make sure that your life is only worth a fraction of that. But for them, their sick amusement is over. They've had their fun, and now it's time to go ahead and call an end to this little game. Now, there have already been a number of cities across the U.S. that have been making those grumblings that, why are we making payments at all? This is problematic. But it shouldn't surprise anyone at all that it's Chicago, which I was told is supposed to be a Democratic city that would be the first major city in America that's launching a real salvo against paying anything to the black victims of white supremacist police violence. In 2020, Mia Wright and 4 of her friends were at a mall in Chicago when a gang of cops just descended on them, started beating the hell out of them, saying that these guys were looters or something. The cops smashed the windows to the car, and some of that glass got into Mia Wright's right eye, leaving her blind in that eye. And it's understandable that she wasn't aware of what had happened to her eye just yet, because the cops had already yanked her out of the car. They had thrown her on the ground and put their knee on her neck because they were making it very clear what happened to George Floyd is going to happen to her too. Now, there's video of this violent attack by the thugs in blue on Mia Wright and her friends. By the way, 4 of them being women, might I add. So there's no question about what occurred. But even so, you have a particularly odious racist piece of garbage named Nicholas Spassato. I think that's an Italian name, isn't it? And he just insists why Wright and her friends, they weren't there to shop, they were there to loot stores. Did I mention that there was absolutely no evidence of anything stolen on them? They hadn't stolen anything, no evidence that they had been involved in anything illegal whatsoever. And by the way, that Alderman Spassato character, he's also been involved in aggressively doing fundraising for police who have killed black people. That's what this guy likes to do in his spare time. When he's not sticking up for police harming black people, he's trying to make sure that they avoid punishment. So these are the kind of fine folks who are on the Chicago City Council. Now, the Chicago City Council has a finance committee, and they're the ones who actually discuss and handle things like payouts to citizens who have been harmed by their city's employees. And it's not just Mia Wright and her friends. There's also other people who have been harmed or even killed who they discuss and handle settlements for as well. But out of the 20 members of the Chicago City Council Finance Committee, 13 are black, the other 7 are not black. And you won't be surprised to learn that when it came time to talk about Mia Wright and her friends, only the black committee members voted for Mia Wright and her friends to receive a settlement. All of the non-black members of the Chicago City Council Finance Committee voted against it. And it wasn't just that racist reprobate Spassato. All of them are Democrats or former Democrats. There is one who claims to be unaffiliated, who used to be a cop, by the way. This is who's on your Chicago City Council Finance Committee. And these guys all got into lockstep as soon as you start talking about making sure that black people are given reparations for harm done by these thugs in blue. All of a sudden, all the Democrats, they start acting just like Republicans. And that includes the Hispanic members of the Chicago City Council, like the Democratic Chicago Alderman Raymond Lopez. He's one of those white Latinos and a Democrat, and he opposed the settlement for Mia Wright, saying that it would be opening a, quote, Pandora's box, and that it would, quote, give everyone an excuse to start suing. And before we go any farther, I think this would be a good time to mention that our racist pal, Nicholas Posado, he also was a Democrat up until 2017. He's not a Republican now. Apparently, he's registered himself as an independent. But think about that. From when this scumbag first got into politics up until just 5 years ago, this guy was a Democrat. But you got one of these white Latinos who's leading the charge and saying we shouldn't be paying any settlements to these negroes. Remind me again about that whole black-brown alliance and how great it is. I keep forgetting. But the racist white Latino Raymond Lopez, he's all angry about paying a settlement would be opening a Pandora's box, but he doesn't say a word about how there's already been a Pandora's box of murders and brutality opened against black Chicago residents. He doesn't say anything about that. So he's concerned about a Pandora's box of legal action due to the violent behavior of the Chicago police. At no point does he actually ask any questions about the validity of the violence. He doesn't question whether or not it's happening. Instead, he's just saying we shouldn't be doing anything about it. They don't say what they're going to do to punish the police because they don't want anything to be done. And just in case you forgot, the current head of the Chicago City Thug Patrol is none other than David Brown. You recall that milk dud looking scumbag. He was also the chief of police in Dallas. The scumbag couldn't do anything about suspected white supremacists like Lorne Michaels running around with all manner of white supremacist tattoos on them. He couldn't do anything about all the anti-black violence of the Dallas PD. He couldn't do anything about that. But he did want everyone to know that he had given the word to kill Micah Johnson. He wanted to make sure that people understood I was behind that. That was all me. Micah Johnson, who was a law-abiding citizen, man had no criminal record, military veteran, but neither then Dallas police thug, Chief David Brown, or the white media, they weren't playing any sad violins for him. They weren't pointing out, hey, look at this guy's military record. Look at this guy's record in the community. Look what everybody's saying about it. Everybody loved this guy. Nah. See, if you're a mass shooter in Las Vegas, they're going to talk about, what your job aspirations were. He wanted to be self-employed. He had dreams and hopes. The guy took out 60 people, laughing while he did it. Well, he's white, so I'm sure he had a good reason for it. If nothing else, then we'll just go ahead and blame it on mental health issues. That's the cover-all excuse. That's the golden blackjack that never misses. So this is the guy who was chosen to be the chief of the Chicago Police Department. I guess they figured, hey, we like the way you handle things, or at the very least, we already know we ain't gonna have too many problems out of this boy. So we got all the thugs and scumbags and cretins and creeps getting on code that it's time to let these niggers know we're gonna start giving you a hard time about those settlements before we just stop doing it altogether. They understand their job is to protect the perpetrators of anti-black violence. They're in favor of it. And they're being blatant about it. You've seen how your black-brown alliance is working out. When you've got Democrats like this, who needs Republicans? But of course, that's the entire point. The Democrats are not and have never been different from the Republicans. Especially when you got these guys in political isolation. At that point, there's no Republicans for them to be concerning themselves with having to compete with, so they can go ahead and just show exactly what they think. This is Chicago, it's supposed to be a Democrat-run and controlled city. And it's non-black Democrats who have been the loudest on this. Rahm Emanuel, who was the mayor of Chicago just before Miss Buckwheat took over, he himself said that Democrats need to cultivate Biden Republicans. And by that, he meant casual racists, or so-called white moderates, as the white media likes to say. But the casual racists that Emanuel and the Democrat leadership want to attract, these aren't the left-of-center college types. No, what Rahm Emanuel was talking about and what the Democrats have made clear they want are the kind of hopefully suburbanite type of white voters who can be persuaded to vote for the Democrats so long as the Democrats run on issues primarily like climate change or LGBT issues, that kind of thing. Basically, social Democrats. You know, the kind of casual racist who could be persuaded to vote for the Democratic Party if the Democrats would just put some distance between themselves and their empty, insincere rhetoric about black people. Stop pretending like you're sticking up for black people because, that kind of thing rubs us the wrong way. If you would just drop some of that rhetoric, why? We can have all sorts of political overlap. Why? We feel the same way about LGBT and immigration, as long as it's not black immigrants, and the climate and such. Just don't say much about the economy and don't say anything about black people and why you could persuade us to even vote for Joe Biden. That's what Rahm Emanuel and the Democrats have been trying to do. The Democrats want people who they can depend on to vote for them as long as they don't have to advocate anything that will benefit black people. Because Democrats now recognize black people as having turned into a political vulnerability. They have a constituency who could cripple the entire party if black folks ever organized our vote around tangibles for ourselves and punishment for those who harm us. That's why you got people like Nigga Jim Clyburn, America's favorite sharecropper, who's been yelling and barking, "Stop sloganizing! Stop sloganizing! Sloganizing kills!" Really? Sloganizing kills? Tell that to Laquan McDonald. Tell that to Tatiana Jefferson. Tell that to Ahmaud Arbery. A lot of black people literally sold their souls for a fish fry. But with black people getting on code about tangibles and punishment for those who harm us, Democrats are being pressured to make changes that they desperately don't want to make. Their job is not to push any sort of constituents' agenda. Their job is to be controlled opposition. Their job is to get us to sit on our hands while white supremacy runs us over. That's their job. And if we won't obey them, then they'll send out some bootlegged Negro to yell at us. But as we see, they're getting scared, and fear is quickly giving way to anger because they see that there's a lot of black folks who are getting off of their hands. They're no longer sitting on their hands anymore. They're standing up, especially young black people, and they're getting in the faces of all of these anti-black racists. The lies about qualified immunity being the reason that they couldn't prosecute the police, that's been knocked down. Qualified immunity is still intact nationwide, but the police are being consistently prosecuted and convicted regardless. The white media doesn't mention that. You notice how they stopped talking about qualified immunity? They just dropped that immediately because they can't talk about it anymore. To do so would be to prove their narrative was a lie all along. So no more talk about qualified immunity. No one in the white media or the government mentions qualified immunity anymore because, as we told you, it was nothing more than a pathetic rhetorical excuse for them to hide behind, because they thought that there would never be enough public pressure put on them to force them to prosecute the police. And then came the uprisings of 2020. Black people started making house calls on the thugs with badges, and they all realized that the people were making it clear, if you're not going to protect us from these criminals, we're going to protect ourselves. But we got to be honest here. It wasn't just the thugs with badges who were put on notice. They weren't the only ones who got shook by seeing black people standing up for themselves 2 years ago. It was also a lot of their numerous allies in the white media, the government, and as we've seen with the Chicago City Council, a lot of these non-black individuals and groups who have benefited off the racial hierarchy of anti-black racism. A lot of non-white groups who have been handed benefits because white supremacy recognized the need to artificially elevate those groups over black people as a means of getting them to support white supremacy. In many nations where oppressor groups take over, they create a single buffer class. Well, in the U.S., the white supremacists were sophisticated. So they created a number of buffer classes. And while these buffer classes may not be equally elevated, they all understand that white supremacy has assigned them a place higher than black people. And so they will fight to protect it. And that's what we see going on in Chicago. White supremacists have a lot of non-white allies. As we put pressure on the leaders of white supremacy, their flunkies and fellow travelers will be forced to protect their benefactors. But who's not going to be getting protection is all the black folks who thought that they were going to be having themselves some sort of finesse. This is going to be the new side hustle. Well, if the cops harm me or they harm one of my loved ones, we'll go to court. Nah, they're making it clear. We're going to go ahead and bring down the curtain on that one. We're not going to slam the curtain down, but we're going to do it slowly. First, we're going to start by fighting you on it. We may let it go through. We're going to fight you on it first, but soon we're just going to say, okay, we've had enough of giving you a hard time on it. Now it's just time to stop it altogether. And all of these Negroes who've been thinking to themselves that they were going to get some sort of lawsuit lottery, as they understand that no, the only thing you're going to get is killed and nothing else. Because we've already seen cases already where you've had these families who thought to themselves that they'd be suing these cities and getting something, and they didn't. Botham Jean's family happens to be one of those prime examples, hugging on Amber Geiger in the courtroom, and you've had the courts who has said, well, we're throwing out this whole claim about you're going to be suing the city of Dallas. We're throwing that out. Maybe you can sue Amber Geiger, but we're not going to be letting you sue the city. They're still fighting that, by the way. Sleaze Merritt's the one who's supposed to be handling this case for them. But the city of Dallas has been dismissed from the civil suit that Botham Jean's family has filed, even though Amber Geiger was in uniform when she murdered the man. See, that's what you get when you decide that you're going to play the fool for white supremacy. All that forgive stuff, and we're hugging her in the courtroom. Hell, if you showed that Botham Jean's life didn't mean anything to you, why the world should they pay anything? I mean, it's not like you're going to cause them any trouble or anything. So they went ahead and made themselves doormats for white supremacy, and white supremacy's walking all over them. One way or the other, a lot of these dumb Negroes who think to themselves that life is going to get better for them after somebody gets killed by the police and we'll just sue the city. The white supremacists don't want to see black people have anything. All of these hood rats and dusty dudes, or all of these would-be opportunists who have this mentality of, well, so-and-so is dead, I might as well get something out of it. All of these little dirtbag maneuvers that have been going on, you're seeing that the white supremacists have had enough of playing along with it. And just as they were completely and thoroughly callous and unapologetic about murdering a black person and then saying, oh, well, that's just the way it is, they'll be completely and thoroughly callous and unapologetic about saying, all right, and we're through paying you niggers any money too. Personally, I'm fine with that, because all of these clowns who have been playing this little game, when they see Sleaze Merritt or one of his pals come along, they'll be the first ones who all of a sudden they're not forgiving anything because they don't see how it's going to benefit them. All of a sudden they're not going to be looking for that anymore. When it becomes a matter of either you make sure that these white supremacist animals who are murdering black people get punished, or all that's going to happen is you just have an unexpected funeral for your family member. When you give them that choice and there is no, oh, but you can also file a lawsuit too. When it's just a matter of either you get justice or all that happens is death, then all of a sudden they're going to change what the hell they're saying. Not because they wanted to, but because they didn't have a choice. And we won't have to hear any more of their blathering asinine nonsense about forgive and such. Well, I don't think it was racist. We won't be hearing that mess anymore. You can't put a price tag on that. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Philander Bryant, Sabrina, Maurice Soul, Nicholas Moore, and Joe Marshall. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.